All right. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the Alliance of Angels webinar series. Thank you for joining us. Today, we will be talking about go-to-market strategy. Together with Artemis Connection, we are privileged to have Christy Johnson and Kia Davis to join us for that. As we go along this session, we do ask that, if you have any questions, you want to ask our speakers, please feel free to jump in, right? You can use the chat. This is a regular Zoom meeting, not a webinar. So feel free, you use the chat. And you're also welcome to speak up, put yourself off mute and ask folks. I think it'll be a lot more fun and interactive experience if we all get together. But again, as I mentioned earlier, if you are not speaking, we do ask that you put yourself on mute so that we have a good listening experience for everyone else as we go along. So before we get started, I'm just going to mention a few things about the organization I'm with. My name is E. Jane. I run Alliance of Angels. It's an angel investing group that I'm with. We have about 150 angels in the organization at this time. We make about 20 investments a year, give or take. Most of the companies that are fundraising from us, they're looking for a total of $500,000 to 1.5. And my typical check size is 250 to 500. Right? Otherwise, we are sector agnostic. We are also relatively stage agnostic. My hard filter is that we focus on helping companies in the Pacific Northwest. So if you are interested in fundraising, learning more about my organization, feel free to send me a note. My email is at the bottom of this slide. Or if you are an angel investor that's joining us, curious to learn more about my group, I'm also happy to follow up with you on that. All right, so I should better stop talking and I'm going to stop sharing as well. I'm going to hand this meeting over to our speakers today, Christy and Kia. Please take it away.
Hi, everyone. Hi, everyone.
Kia, you are on. I'll let you take it off.
Yeah. I'll just say really quickly, I'm Kia Davis. I'm with Artemis Connection, and Christy, I'll let you introduce yourself while I pull up the slides.
Awesome. Well, it's so great to be with all of you today. I'm a huge fan of Alliance of Angels and all that it does in the local community. And I see people dropping in LinkedIn and connections in the chat. So keep doing that. It's always good to connect with other folks who are trying to make positive change happen. So hi, Christy Johnson. By way of background, I've always been really interested in innovation and entrepreneurship, future of work, diversity, equity, and inclusion, and spent time at McKinsey & Company, where I did growth and innovation strategy. So trying to predict where the world was going, and then making sure that the company was prepared. And sometimes that involved incubating or being entrepreneurial inside a big organization, and other times it involved M&A and trying to find great startups to acquire. Ended up actually getting involved in my first startup when I was in graduate school. The dean at the Stanford School of Business had to constantly remind us that it was an MBA, not a master's in entrepreneurship, because 05 to 07 was a really exciting time to be down in the Valley, and went on to do a few other startups as well. So I'm building my fourth one right now. We've been in business for about 8 years. And then I also do a lot of work still with the University of Washington, because educational institutions play a really important role. Kia and I are going to talk a lot about go-to-market and why we care so much about it, but it is often seen as why maybe the Pacific Northwest ecosystem looks slightly different than others, is our go-to-market strategies and muscles aren't quite as robust, even though our technical talent is amazing. So I'll hand it over to Kia to do her intro.
Okay, great. Yep, Kia Davis. I am here in the Pacific Northwest now, but prior to the pandemic, I spent about 15 years in London and in Dubai, as well as some other places globally. And what I've been focusing on over the last 15 or so years is entrepreneurship in ecosystems and the stakeholders that can enable them. So whether it's working group papers for a UK regulator, or whether it's working directly with entrepreneurs, that's really been a thread of what I've done over the years. And currently I do work with Christy at Artemis Connection. We'll talk a little bit about that a little bit later on. And for example, my biggest client at the moment is a small software company that was spun out from a larger company and is looking to bring over all the customers and really kind of be independent for the first time in some time. So it's something I live and work on, and go-to-market has always been top of mind, but we're just so happy to be here and get to know the community a little bit better. I would love for those of you with free fingers just to pop into the chat where maybe where you are. Probably we're all local, but if there are any areas there, what organization you're with, if you are, and if you're an entrepreneur or if you're more on the angel and investment side. I'd love to know a bit about that. We've sized this really for everyone, but it would still be good to know what the makeup is. Okay, Christy, I'll hand over to you.
Amazing. All right. So why does go-to-market matter? So you can see a couple of stats here on failed startups, not having a market need, also not being able to validate a business model or having some sort of price or cost issue. So having a good go-to-market strategy can help minimize some of these. So that's kind of one, like you want to stay in business, right? A second one is just having an alignment across the core areas of customer problem, value prop, and then making sure that you're supporting this and having a marketing plan. And that's key for both your success as well as being able to attract investment. And I think especially in light of what's been going on with the economy or all the uncertainty that we're seeing right now and interest rates going up, there's a lot more pressure on can you be revenue positive? Do you know how you're going to be able to attract and retain good customers? And then this last part's really around this term go to market and what does it actually even mean? So sometimes people will be like, oh, that's marketing, right? Like we don't have time for marketing, or like it's sales, but we have a better technical product. But actually you do have to think through who you're trying to reach, how you can get them to tell other people about what it is that you're offering, and that this can make a really big difference. So I'll share one example and then we can look at another slide, but we've seen some pretty interesting things in ed tech. I think since COVID, there's been a lot of desire to improve the educational space. And with that, there's been a lot of really cool and innovative startups that have come into play. And then you layer in like AI and what's happening there. And I will say, having been an instructor and having kids in the K-12 system, there's a lot of opportunity. Yet these areas have always been really challenging from a go-to-market standpoint because you might have a user that's different than the buyer, and how is all the funding happening? And so what we actually saw a really cool startup that had definitely a best-in-class product, some really good AI, and they're getting outbeat in the marketplace because folks that had a far inferior product in terms of capabilities and customer support and all of that had a much better sales and marketing team. And their go-to-market strategy in particular was really targeted and leveraging ambassadors and like getting teachers on TikTok talking about it, and then being involved in conferences and having like some swag. So it was really interesting to watch this far superior technical product in the educational space lose out to much inferior product that in some ways is very old school in their approach, but was able to have a more robust go-to-market plan and really capture market share. So just one example, but we just wanted to highlight that. And we'll weave in examples as we go throughout our time today. You want to hit the next slide, Kia?
Yeah.
Thank you. And this is some thing that some of you may have used the business model canvas. So if you have, like, feel free just to pop in the chat, just so we have a rough sense on if this is something that you are familiar with or not. This is Key and I both teach at the University of Washington. This is a tool that we like to bring in because if you get good at building a business model canvas, you can actually do it really quickly and you can validate ideas. But if you look at this, what it does is it lets you test your outline, validate the building blocks of your idea. And especially for some of you that are maybe a bit more technical, this can help you make sure that you actually understand the problem that you're solving and how are you going to solve it in a way that creates value. And then once you know that, it's easy to have a go-to-market strategy against that. So, if you think about your go-to-market strategy, you're really focused on the right-hand side of your business model canvas. So who are the customers that are going to fall in love with what it is that you're doing and are able to do something better, faster, or cheaper than other products that are on the market? Like, then the more you can quantify the value proposition. So DocuSign was brilliant early on with their go-to-market of like, do you hate paper? How much time is that taking, right? We can save you money and we can save you time. So really honing in on that value prop. And then you can start to think about your go-to-market and how do you reach those customers? What are the channels? How do you have a really rich strategy there? The reason why we find this is helpful is that the logic has to be super tight. So Key and I have both seen many startups waste a lot of money and a lot of time on go-to-market activities. And some of you may have had this experience that you get a little bit of success and all of a sudden all these people start reaching out via LinkedIn on like, you need me, I can help you increase your sales by X percentage. I have a go-to-market strategy that's guaranteed to give you this. And if your logic's not tight, or if you don't fully understand what your go-to-market is and who the customers are you're serving, you may say yes to something and waste time and money and also just your energy. So we're happy to talk through this in more detail. If any of you are interested in learning more, there's also some awesome classes at the UW that you can be involved in.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Christy. So let's talk through what let me first ask you, what is the, what should the components be for a go-to-market strategy? I'm going to put in the chat here, go to menti.com and enter the code 2680913. And that should allow you to enter some answers. And I'm actually just going to stop sharing so that you can go through and not be quite as influenced by others. I'll put it back in just a bit. But the question is, what should a go-to-market strategy contain? Let me get it. Let me know if you have any issues getting in. Let's see if you pop up. Great. Great. Oh, I'm loving these. I am loving these. Okay, I'm going to start putting them up. Please continue to put them in. I think there's some really great answers here and a lot that are really going to touch on a number of things that we're going to talk about today. So pricing is one that comes up. Absolutely. I think that's, it's going to be really important as you think about go-to-market. As we go through some elements today, I'm going to invite you to think about some nuance and maybe some balancing factors around the pricing. Target customers is absolutely critical. Solution, proposition, the ideal customer, great. Market positioning, that's fantastic. Market sizing, target audience, target channel, demographics, the pipeline, the competition looks like, buyer persona. Yeah, absolutely. So I love these. And the answers really do seem to reflect that a number of you have either been dealing with this for a while, or you have an established business, or maybe you've been investing for some time and you know what to look for. I really like these. So I would say all of these are really kind of right answers. Let's think about maybe how they can fit together. This is one view of what a launch plan for a go-to-market strategy can look like. So the first thing, a number of you said the demographics and the customer segment. I think that's absolutely critical. And I would really encourage you all to start with that. Of course, when you've got your solution in your head, you're like, oh, but I've got the answer. But I would really invite you to take a step back, have a look at the segment, and we'll talk about that in a bit. What problem or use case you are addressing, the value proposition, then the partnership. So now we start looking a little more externally, right? So who are you going to engage with to help get off the ground? What's your marketing plan look like? And to Christy's point earlier, you'll notice you don't start with the marketing plan. That really kind of comes closer to the end. And then finally, what I call the launch plan. So that's a little bit more what needs to be in place on launch day. And if you think about the first three in the wheel, the segments, the use case, and the value proposition, you really want to achieve kind of a lock and key approach where you understand that those three are probably the biggest single foundation for the whole process. For your customer target, for your customer segments, you absolutely want to find your target customer. I'd also like to point out, it can be a subset. So Christy and I were at an event, the Dempsey competition a few weeks ago, if those of you who are familiar with UW. And it was really interesting to see this exhibition hall filled with startups. And one of them had an idea around mapping out campuses and all the campus resources for universities. And the first one that they started with was, of course, the University of Washington, right? They're there, they're residents, they know it, they use it every day, they represent the consumer, et cetera. So and I said, okay, well, what schools do you go to next? They didn't actually come back to me with an answer on that, which I actually think is really smart, because what they wanted to do was really demonstrate in the ideal scenario where they knew everything there and they had easy access to all the elements, what really worked. And then they were going to look at where can we actually launch this in ways that that align to the patterns that we found. So it may not be your whole customers, it might be a very specific segment that you want to launch with, and I really encourage that. They need to be easy to reach. Using the same example, these folks, they could walk to all of the partners that they wanted to link in. Ideally, you're targeting customers that are well networked. This is so that they can bring others onto the platform and just make your job a little bit easier. That's going to be easier for some ideas than others. And another critical piece is that they can feedback. So I think I mentioned I'm on a customer migration. It's effectively a go-to-market, and feedback is absolutely essential for us. And that's something that we're doing every day. We built a product to a specific set of specifications, and we're enhancing it according to the feedback that's coming in on an hourly basis, right? So that's going to be super essential so that you know what's working and what's not. And then you just want to find customers that are really willing to work with you, to press that button. If they're super hard to reach, if you want to go to country clubs first, well, they're known for being a bit old school. They may not be in a position to experiment. So you might want to try an organization that's either a little hungrier or maybe newer or has something to prove, new management, whatever the dynamic might be. And then once you have that subsegment, that subset locked, what use case specifically are you going to handle for them? So yes, by now you're clear on the problem. That's great. But what is the specific use case? There was a competitor to Uber that launched in the Middle East, and Uber was already there. So the use case that they launched with was airport rides, because at the time, Uber didn't allow you to pre-book. That was a huge pain point for the professional customers.
The towel back, put over here.
Sorry, is that a question? Okay. And so they launched with airport rides. You can pre-book, you can prepay, it can go onto your expenses before you set foot in the car. They'll be waiting there for you at 4 in the morning or whenever, right? So what specific pain point are you able to address? And then what are you bringing to the table? And again, this doesn't have to be your full product with the full suite. It might be those essential features, your MVP or the minimum viable product. You're super clear on how you're going to create value. In the Uber competitor case, their name was Kareem. They were sold to Uber for about $4 billion 4 years ago or so. In that case, the value created was, we're going to link to your expenses better, and we're going to be there when you need us. You don't have to wake up and have that on your to-do list. The access and delivery, how are folks going to use what you have, right? So are you on the, on the Meta platform or the Facebook platform? Are you something that has to be downloaded? Be super clear about that and making sure that it aligns to the use case. And then one that often I think gets kind of thrown by the wayside is support. Customers are not going to use it the way you expect. You don't have perfect marketing, sorry to say, but you're going to get curveballs. And what happens when a customer has a question, is unhappy, simply made a mistake? what are you going to do to support that process? A number of startups often want to go the do-it-yourself route, and that in some ways that's fine. It's got to be appropriate to the segment. So if you're selling concierge services, you can't have a do-it-yourself approach to support. If you do want something where people just do it yourself, you really have to build out the user ed, the FAQs, the manuals, the branch logic on the problems, maybe a chatbot that can help them through. So, if you don't want people manning the phones, then, you need to think about how extensive you can be on supporting whatever you release. Just going to stop there for a bit and take stock in the room. First of all, Christy, any examples you can think of folks that did this really well or poorly? And while she's talking, I'm going to invite folks to offer their own in the chat as well.
Yeah, no, I love this. I'm excited to see what people bring up in the chat. I think on that point with support, actually, there was a really interesting a supply chain startup that had a lot of data because it was monitoring supply chains, and it was divested or spun out of a pretty big company. And so what they did with their support, they knew they were dealing with executives. They knew that the supply chain was an issue. And so they came up with these like VIP groups, and, they were selling to big companies. And so what they would find is if they could get like an SVP of procurement or supply chain, a group that's normally not treated all that well, and treat them really well. So we're talking like Gartner Supply Chain Conference, like special events where there are fancy dinners, or there might be like concerts or things that were done. And they did most of this actually in partnership. So as a startup, it didn't cost them very much because there were other folks that were wanting to get this group. But what happened is they were able to hear the pain points. They did offer really targeted support after the fact. So people felt like they had kind of a red phone hotline they could call if they had an issue with the SaaS product. And because of that, they were able to really understand the client's pain points and then launch what actually ended up coming out to be 4 different products that they were able to bundle and sell. And they're doing quite well now. But their go-to-market strategy was really about like finding a buyer, intimately understanding their pain points, also realizing this buyer normally is kind of ignored, and treating them really, really well, and building a bit of a community where they could then hear more of the problems and have a product roadmap that was built and customized to this group. And then the group loved feeling like they were VIPs and were more than willing to test things, introduce to their friends, pull them into additional companies if the SVP moved from Johnson & Johnson to Medtronic or something like that. So again, you can think about this and be really creative about how you're building that relationship with your customers and understanding what their pain points are.
That's great. That's great. Thank you, Christy. Absolutely. It's going to be super important to tailor whatever you offer to who your folks are. Any questions? Comments? I see some networking in the chat, which is great. Okay. Okay. I see one. June.
Hi, I have a question. I connect local farms to the people in the community who are looking for fresh, local, and organic food. So we have a marketplace. We have 5 people on our team. But that's just a little background there. So I'm getting I get feedback from the farms, or I post their farms on Facebook with a vanity address to our site. And then the farms get a lot of hits on Facebook, and I see them saying, wow, we're getting a lot of people coming here, but they don't know that we're the ones who are posting necessarily. And I don't know how to organize the feedback that I get from farms and from consumers.
That is fantastic. Okay. So, and I'll invite Christy to respond as well. One option is to, focus some of the channels that it comes in. So if you're able to do, for instance, surveys, there's some analytics that will come there. If you're able to do one-to-one meetings with folks, you can, there are tools now where it'll transcribe it later. Some offer to summarize. I haven't found summarized ones that are that great, but at least you can kind of search for some keywords and do some marking, and it'll sort of mark things by who's, who speaks when. And then the others, once you have some hypotheses around, or some directed questions around, like, okay, what's working well, what isn't, this is what I need to watch out for, you can kind of filter stuff out and really kind of perk up when you start hearing those things. So whether it's in person, whether a meeting, whether, online, you can just start scanning for things that are much more related to the areas that are either under development or super important. That's one thing I would say. Christy, any other thoughts?
Yeah, and absolutely with marketplaces, it's always challenging, right? Because you're getting so much information and you're having to have essentially a go-to-market strategy for both sides of the market to get them to stay on board. So I think what Kia shared is really, really important. And then also just constantly honing in on, like, where's your revenue coming from? And where's your most profitable revenue coming from? And what is that group saying that they need? Because actually, profits make a lot of things easier. And so if you can make sure that you have some recurring revenue in place and optimize for that it can make a really big difference. I did see another question about angel investors and what do they look for in go-to-market plans. So I can hit on this, and Kia, feel free to add to it as well. And I will say that all investors, including angel investors, I think are being a bit more rigorous right now in understanding what is happening with plans. So some of the things that Kia's already hit on is they want to know that you've done your market analysis. So do you understand the target market, its size, its growth potential, who the competitors are, et cetera? Investors don't like it when you're like, oh, we're the only one in our space, right? That's usually something that they don't like. And again, make it really easy on yourself. Think about who's actually going to fall in love and rave about your product and tell everyone, whether it be direct to business or direct to consumers. Another part will be around that unique value proposition and really pushing on your thinking. What are you doing that's better than everyone else's? What proof points do you have? Ideally, it's actually testimonials and feedback you're getting from actual customers that you can repeat versus claims that you're making. Another part around, like, the market and the sales strategy, which feeds into some of that go-to-market, but they do want to know that you're going to be able to acquire, retain, and deepen your relationship with your customers, and that you have a robust strategy for doing so. And then execution, right? Because that's actually really hard. And if you can get a few folks, as you get some traction, that have experience executing at a similar size company, because I love big company folks, but sometimes they're like, hire 10 people and then we'll be able to have a go-to-market strategy. So find people that can actually go hands on keyboard and be able to deliver on your go-to-market strategy, and that you're confident in knowing that you can execute in a consistent way that isn't dependent on any one human that may, end up winning the lottery and, like, not coming to work someday. And then the last two things I feel like I'm seeing more of right now would be financial projections. So a bit more push on, okay, you have an influencer strategy. You're going to pay $27,000 for a placement. This is actually a real example from something in the home goods space. You say $20,000 to get 3 posts on a mommy blog, because mommy blogs can sell a lot of stuff. How are you going to know that that works, right? I want to see your financial projections. I want to see, can you run a test with one and demonstrate that it does convert into sales the way that you're thinking? You're going to hire some people. How much are these marketing people going to cost, right? How do you know that your sales reps are going to be able to deliver? So I am seeing more questions and pushing on the financial projections than I have historically. And then the last part, which I hit on a bit with the execution plan, but all investors want to know that the team has some knowledge and experience and is able to learn in this space. So those are some things I consistently see. I'm curious if there's anything else that you would add, Kia.
I think that's absolutely great. And as much as possible, just showing and proving, one, you've done your research, and also that feedback, doing like you're bringing up, so that when you do have the projections and the market sizing, et cetera, it's not numbers that you've made up, it's things that are grounded. So particularly things like growth rates, right? And one thing that, Christy was hitting on is you never want to say, oh, we're just going to get a teeny tiny percentage of this massive market, right? Because it's not grounded in anything. It's much better to say, well, we're going to start in the, in the town of Bellevue, and we want to get 75%, brand recognition with the mommies there. If it's part of the mommy groups there, that is much better because that proves that you really have something, and you have a clear strategy for reaching out and getting them, and not just that you think that you're going to accidentally hit it big, which is what the tiny percentage of big market communicates. June.
This is really helpful, but I just want to tell you guys have so much information. I really need a recording, but the market size. So we have a huge market size, but what investors, or I've been told that they want the attainable market or something like that. How do I develop those numbers to put on my pitch deck so that it informs the investor, but it also informs me, because I don't know what it means to have those attainable numbers. Thank you.
That's great. Yeah, no, that's great. I'm going to let Christy address it because she's such a whiz at this, but I am going to give a book recommendation. Peter Thiel's 0 to 1 talks a lot about how you think about, it's really about competition, but how you think about market. And one of the points he gets across is you get to define what market you're in. So Lululemon, are they in fitness? Are they in yoga? Are they in fashion? You really get to make that definition, and you have to act accordingly that you can define that. Christy, anything to add on market sizing?
Yeah, I mean, this is a hard one, right? And Kia and I spend a lot of time in the classes that we teach working on this, and we have some tools that can help play around with it too. But so one thing that might help is just part of what you want to be able to do, and why market sizing and knowing the attainable market is important, is it will let you know where there are opportunities, and then you can decide where to put your time. So it is a bit of a thought exercise, but what investors are looking for, and it's the same thing with your financials when you're projecting 3 years out, because none of us has a crystal ball, but it's more the logic, like what's going into your assumptions, how are you testing this, what have you done already that gives you confidence. And so it's actually some of that thinking process that ends up being important. And then this is also a case where sometimes some gender dynamics can come into place. There's quite a bit of research that women will tend to underestimate the size. We tend to be a little bit more conservative with our estimates, and men will tend to be a little bit more bold in some of their assertions, which is, great. Then this is why it's great to have diversity on teams, because then that discussion can come into place and you can have something in the middle. But it is a helpful exercise to go into, because let's say, for example, you're considering maybe 3 different markets: Portland, Seattle, Bellingham, just totally making these up. You could figure out what your attainable market would be in those 3, and then you could sequence your go-to-market strategy based on where you think you're going to get the most happy customers and the most profitable revenue. And then you can use that to fuel expansion into other markets. So again, it's really meant to be a tool that helps you make decisions on how to prioritize scarce resources.
Yeah. Great, thanks. So just in the interest of time, I think we'll continue weaving examples in rather than take time out for a specific case study. But Christy, I'd love if you could talk a bit about partnerships.
Yes, absolutely. And we love to tell some stories, so we'll tell these throughout. And I will say, sometimes it can be a little bit overwhelming to think about go-to-market. Founders love to tell their stories, and what can be most helpful. So I'm on my 4th startup now. And what I found early on was if I talked to somebody maybe a year or 2 ahead of me, was really helpful, because they remembered how hard it was to do things like get a good partnership strategy. But partnerships are actually really important. The big companies in town have large partnership teams. And part of the reason why is partners can accelerate or broaden your launch. So you can think through, and we listed 5 different types of partners that you might look at: channel, distribution, sales, brand, and development. And you want a partnership to add value on both sides. So really thinking through, okay, what are our goals and expectations? Like dream world, this goes really well as a partnership. what happens, right? And then what are we expecting from each other? How are we going to interact? You might actually even want to get into some values, talk through if there's a conflict, like how are you going to deal with and resolve that? A second part is like just making sure that the partner has the resources and the motivation to support that partnership. So I can give you a specific example. The company I'm running right now, Artemis, we have amazing senior leaders like Kia who've done a lot of international work. And so we actually want to get more international work. We also think it makes our thinking better because, you know, American can get very US centric. And so we decided to partner and collaborate with a firm out of Sweden that has really good market penetration in Europe and also in Southeast Asia, but they have zero in the US. So both of us have dedicated a resource. We've set up regular time to review what's going to happen. We're weekly cadence. We have some shared CRM systems. So I feel confident that a partnership like this will actually create some sort of value because we've structured it in a way and both sides are committing some resources to it. And then we have a regular process to put into place. And the third one is just talking about capability and a clear plan to fulfill the partnership. So this, you know, unfortunately, we do see some startups enter into partnerships without a clear plan, right? It's like, oh, you're working in a parallel space to us, like we should be partners. But then there's no specifics or details on what it is that you're going to do, no short, medium, and long-term sorts of goals or outcomes that both sides are driving towards. And so you can come to the end of a quarter or the end of the year and not have those results that you had hoped for. And then this last one that's really important, especially always, and especially in your startup days, is making sure that your partner has a good reputation and a relevant track record with your customers. So for example, I won't name who we also partnered with at one point, Kia, but you know who I'm talking about. We partnered with someone who, another consulting firm that was doing really interesting work in a space that we care deeply about, and did not have the greatest reputation in terms of how it treated talent. And so we brought the project in. The team was very excited about the content, about who it is that we were serving, about the work that we were going to be doing. And they were very concerned that we're choosing to work with someone that was known for kind of 24/7, always on sorts of lifestyle. So again, you just really want to think through your reputation, and is whoever you're partnering with, does it have a similar sort of reputation in the customer segments that you're working with? And then also with talent, is it a kind of firm that you would want your talent and your employees to feel proud that you're partnering with? So yeah, I'll hand it back to you, I think, right?
Okay, yeah, great. And I'll just add to that, you know, as we were building this presentation, one of the, I think the biggest innovations that's at the top of mind right now is ChatGPT, and really kind of thinking how they worked through some of these steps. And I invite you to listen to interviews with Sam Altman. I have some that I recommend, but it's just really fascinating study. It's still early days for them, but they've made some very deliberate choices. And on partners, one of the things that they did was they chose Microsoft as a partner with regard to some of the, call it distribution, because Microsoft's planning on integrating ChatGPT specifically into its search feature. And now, you know, why might they have chosen Microsoft? They give the usual boilerplate, yada, yada, long history, blah, 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 shared values. But when you look at the position of Microsoft versus Google in the marketplace, they're competitors for search. Google had a competitive search engine. Google's business model is driven much more by ads and selling ads. And there's a question, I'm not going to come down on either side, but there's a question as to whether that business model has compromised the accuracy of the search results. And so it's entirely possible that ChatGPT, OpenAI is the name of the company, selected Microsoft because they said, well, your business model is a little bit different, and that might better support what we're trying to do with truth and accuracy and long-term sustainability. The other reason that Microsoft might have been a more obvious partner is that they're hungrier. They're not number one in search. They're not number one in advertising. They're not number one in a number of the non-enterprise, more consumer-facing areas. So they may have come to the table with more of a motivation to find things that work for both sides. Again, I'm speculating, but as you look at it, you can see how these things play out at whenever there's a new product that gets launched, even at the very highest levels. Yeah.
And I'm going to give one teeny tiny plug too with actually don't forget academia, because we're super fortunate to have the University of Washington in town, but actually a lot of the public universities in the state have incredibly professors, as does Seattle U and Gonzaga and some of the others. But often there's insights and nuggets that are hanging out in academia that could translate into action. So for example, Artemis has been distributed or remote for the last 8 years. Part of what we did when we were building the company was we found a researcher, Nicholas Bloom out of Stanford, who's brilliant and hilarious. And I wish I'd had economics professors like him earlier on. But he had some research like 7-ish years ago. And, academia can be like 200-page papers. So it can be a little bit, it will work your brain to figure out how to make it actionable at times. And there's really good nuggets that are hanging out there. So we didn't put that on here, but you may want to think through where might there be interesting research happening that you could translate into whatever it is you're working on.
I like that. I think that's absolutely right. No discussion of go-to-market is complete without a discussion of marketing. So we're not going to, that's a topic in and of itself, but I would invite you to think about being deliberate at every stage of the marketing process. So it's never just a one and done. It's never just what was the amount, Christy, 29,000 to an influencer. It's never one single action, but as many of you will already know, it's important to understand for every action that you take, what goal it is that you're trying to achieve, right? So, and this is one framework you'll often see: attract, convert, close, delight, refer, repeat, and might have a few other names. Loosely tracks to a sales funnel process, but there are actions you can take each step of the way to get folks, your customers, to the next level. So whether it's developing your messaging and your positioning, that I would say that falls under attract, for those of you who had it in the word cloud at the top. Developing your branding, understanding the role of influencers, right? Because they can raise awareness, but they're not typically very good at closing transactions for you. The conversion. So where are your folks getting motivated to press the button? And that might be, landing page or newsletters or whatnot. The close, a number of startups, they go from convert maybe to delight, and they don't think about really managing that close process. So yes, they're there. Yes, they want to do it, but how can you help them press the button? So are there payment options that are available? The rise of buy now, pay later, like Affirm or Klarna, really operate here. So that if someone wants, I bought a mattress a few years ago and they offered me 0% financing through Affirm, right? You just spend $1,000 on a mattress. How about you spread that out over 12 payments? Okay, well, that's a fairly good deal, right? So where can you actually help people make that transaction as good as possible? And I would say that's where your pricing and your pricing plans come into effect. I got a message from Netflix saying, hey, listen, we're as low as $6.99 now, right? Because they're trying to expand that to get more folks to close. Then there's the delight. So how can you make it as positive an experience for folks as possible? You want to deepen that appreciation. Yes, they have it, but you want them to be happy with it. Maybe you're asking for feedback. You're giving them a thank you. You're inviting them to be part of a community. And what you really want that hopefully will trigger this whole cycle again are referrals, maybe to their friends or other folks in their network. And repeat business, if that's the type of company that you have, right? So you want to increase sales again. You want to get them, you want to go right back to the beginning. And how can you help, facilitate that? PayPal is kind of classic for this. They're in the very beginning, if someone sent you money via PayPal, it would come via an email that said, hey, if you need, if you want to get your money, you've got to sign up for PayPal. And oh, by the way, if you refer another friend, that's $5. That's a free $5 just for you. And that is credited as really, really starting their flywheel of repeat business in the early days. Christy.
Yeah, let me just add a little bit on the pricing part as well. So it depends, right? Because you have different pricing strategies depending on if you're going direct to consumers or if you're selling to businesses. I would really encourage you early on, for those of you that are early on, to kind of dare to know what people are willing to pay. I do see a lot of models like, oh, I'll be freemium and then I'll get people to pay later, but that often doesn't work. So really push on what are people willing to pay. And a way that you can get at pricing, we're a fan of value-based pricing. We see a lot of folks just make sure they can cover their costs, right? So how much will it cost me to make this thing at 30% or whatever the percentage ends up being, and then you have something. But if you can actually flip it and really think about your customer and what value you're creating for them, absolutely fine to capture some of that value, right? So the more you can understand what that is, and again, if you do your go-to-market strategy in a way where you get some folks that are really excited and on board and willing to give you feedback, then that will help you get better at pricing, because you'll understand more on how you're creating value. So for example, one of the startups that we've done some work with that's focused in the healthcare space, but they're like, we're going to create, 10x the value of our price. And they are able to then show some case studies that once they got on board, because they were able to improve some workflows in healthcare, here's how much money it ended up saving this particular client. They had no problem getting people to pay the price that they were asking for. So again, like, hone in on how you're creating value for your client, and then try to do value-based pricing if you can. And early on, really dare to know what the client is truly willing to pay. And in this day and age, it's actually easier to raise from angels or institutional investors if you do have some signed letters of intent. And so driving towards that early on can actually make it easier for you to fundraise.
And I see a question about pricing your SaaS platform. Christy, do you want to take that?
Oh, well, this is, again, like, you got to be a little creative.
Yeah.
So, and it depends. How's that for a not satisfying answer? But it does depend a bit on what's happening in the competitive landscape. So what are they using right now? And kind of understanding the benchmarks and things that you're going to be held accountable for. So for example, lots of times there are standards in how companies are used to paying for SaaS products. If you're selling to a big company, it's pretty hard to go off what they're used to in the beginning, right? After you build a relationship and have a track record, maybe you can introduce something that's different. But in the beginning, it can be pretty hard to do so. So this is where, like, really understanding the competitive landscape that you're in currently and what your buyers are used to can make a big difference. For those of you that are looking to sell directly to business, sometimes in the middle layers of companies, you can find directors or VPs that can be great to work with and give you a sense on what they're using right now, what that contracting process looks like. There's often thresholds that buyers can get approval from and not have to run it higher up the chain. And so that can be a good way for you to get some paying clients and get a better sense. But I'm more than happy to follow up one-on-one on some things with SaaS pricing, because it's highly variable depending on the market that you're in.
Yeah, I would say it's an art, not a science, and it's a pretty juicy question. It's a good question. It's just hard to give there's less of a one size fits all for that, for sure. Jenkins Lemkin's STR newsletter. Okay, great. Ooh, excellent resources. I like it. We're coming into the home stretch, so for the most part, for the content piece, we'll really kind of end here and just say, really, once you get to the launch plan, which is number 6, you've got all of these other pieces. And again, I want to stress they all work together. Your segment has a specific use case for which you've got a right-sized value proposition, including pricing. You've got a partnership strategy that's aligned and where everyone's on the same page, and a marketing plan that reflects all of your hard work and what you're looking to offer. And then the layer that's added to that to make it a proper launch plan or execution plan or the full go-to-market strategy is really some of the, the numbers. So it's goals, but also maybe some of the resource numbers. How much are you going to invest? It's the timing, by when do things happen? And it's things like performance metrics. So for example, what's your marketing ROI? If you spend $30,000 on an influencer, what specifically do you expect to get from that? And what will you do if that's not in place, right? Do you have a monthly retainer with them? Or is this a one and done where there's really kind of no recovery? How's the contract written? So just understanding, if you are SaaS, there are a few common metrics like average revenue per user, or that kind of thing. But generally, you want to just be super, super thoughtful, and don't be afraid to iterate this whole thing as the feedback comes in, as you launch. You know, did things happen as you expect, or do you need to make an adjustment and realign everything along the way? So for example, I have a recent customer who said, you know what, we're going to raise prices 20% across the board. Okay, well, who's our customer segment is very price sensitive. And we've gone with, they have a problem that's really important, but we have a value proposition that isn't really where we want it to be in 6 months. We're still developing it. So, and our partners who are supposed to help us aren't really fulfilling, you know, what they're supposed to be doing, right? And then our marketing plan, we're kind of under resourced. So how are we going to justify this pricing increase? So that's the kind of, you know, iteration that you want to do. I know we just have a few minutes left. I want to take questions, but just to close us out, we're not going to do the breakout, Christy, if you maybe want to talk through both and then also Artemis.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's been so fun to be here with all of you today. I love the questions and the energy and the sharing that's been happening in the room. You know, Kia and I, through Artemis, we end up working at the system level. So we work with a lot of big companies, but also startups, as well as government that's trying to be more entrepreneurial. So basically launching things in a way that creates positive value in the world. And we absolutely need more people doing that. So if you have questions on like pricing strategy or go to market and launch, absolutely let us know, because we can help organizations through Artemis. Both of us also really love to work with individuals. And so that's where we have our work through the university, the certificate in women's entrepreneurial leadership, which is
Oh no, she's frozen.
that are ways. Oh, sorry, did I freeze?
You froze a bit, but yeah,
Oh.
certificate in entrepreneurial leadership, yeah.
Yeah, so that's just a chance for us to get to work with individuals and really kind of work on an idea that folks might have. Part of our goal with this work is to accelerate things that you might be working on. And this is great for folks that are entre curious. You don't have to have an idea if that's the case. And then, you know, the University of Washington is the big institution in town. So it's a great institution to be associated with. By being a student, you get access to things like librarians that can help you with market sizing, and people want to help students out. So just keep that in mind. It is a certificate program, which means it's open to the broader community. We've had PhDs and MDs and high school students and folks with no college degrees. So it's a real mix, as well as people who've had very successful companies.
Great. And then Artemis.
Yeah, and then this is, again, like more of the systematic work. So we've woven in a couple of stories of different companies that we've worked with. We just really love to quickly give people the help that they need. And sometimes you just need help for a moment in time, right? You need to accelerate a go-to-market strategy, or you're trying to figure out something with pricing. And then we build up the capabilities in your team so it can keep running even once we've left, or we can stay on for additional projects if that's where your team needs help as well. So just wanted to give you just a little bit of more on like how Kia and I can be helpful in the future. Kia is brilliant, just in case you're wondering, and has worked with startups all over the world too, which is always nice to have that world perspective instead of, you know, just US centric or Washington State centric.
That's great, Christy. Thank you. So any questions? What questions do you have? There's just a few more minutes, but we're also happy to stay. I'll also take comments and feedback. Ooh, how much do we charge for go-to-market? I think we would need to learn a little bit more. I'm going to put my I put my email in the chat. I'll also do Christy's, and would love to learn a little bit more. We can give you a better answer.
We have a wide range of companies and sizes and stages that we work with, which is what keeps it fun. We're always learning.
Yeah.
Yeah, excellent. We would love to see questions keep coming. You can also go off mute if you have them as well.
Absolutely. And while you're doing that, one thing I'd like to add, we've used the term customer throughout, but frankly, and Christy alluded to this in the partnership section, it can be any stakeholder in your business. It could be your investor, it could be a supplier, a partner, you know, your employees or contractors that you work with. I strongly advise you to treat them all as key stakeholders and all as customers, because there's going to be a version of this that, you know, that needs to be customized for every set. So everything we said about customers and right sizing it for them and the proposition, that works for partners, that works for you know, employees, that works for investors as well. We have a question about sending out the recording. Can I just check, is that how is that normally managed?
Yes, sure. So to that question, we will be publishing the recording on the Alliance of Angels YouTube channel, and you'll be available, not necessarily in real time, but within a couple of days. So please feel free to check us out there. Yeah, I think we're actually at time. I'm respectful to our speakers, Kia and Christy, who have donated an hour, you know, of the day to us. Thank you so much for sharing all your insights and analysis. And if folks have any extra follow-up questions for them, please feel free to follow up. I think you have the contact information, right, that they shared both in their slides and also in the chat. We also will be sending out the slides. If you signed up by Eventbrite, we'll be sending that out. If you did not, feel free to send me an email, or Katie, my colleague, and we'll be happy to get that out to you. All right. So again, thank you very much to Kia and to Christy, and also thank you to everyone for joining us today.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks, everyone. Love the questions and the interaction. Thank you, Alliance of Angels, as well.
Thank you. All right. All right. Goodbye. Have a great rest of the week. Thank you.
Thank you.